It started, as these things often do, with a knock on the door at the worst possible time. My husband was at work, leaving me to tackle a never-ending pile of laundry, when Jack, his best friend, sauntered in unannounced. Jack had a way of doing that, appearing like an unwanted pop-up ad, promising excitement but delivering chaos. "Hey there, gorgeous!" he called, his voice dripping with exaggerated charm. "Don't worry, I come bearing gifts." I sighed, already regretting opening the door. Jack carried a large, covered cage, his grin wide enough to rival the Cheshire Cat. Whatever he was up to, it couldn't be good. "Jack, what is that?" I asked, folding my arms. "Oh, just a little something to brighten your day," he said, dragging the cage into the living room with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. The moment he pulled the cover off, I knew I was in trouble. Inside was a parrot, bright, colorful, and already glaring at me like I'd insulted its ancestors. "Surprise!" Jack announced, his arms spread wide like he just solved world hunger. I blinked at him. "A parrot?" "Not just any parrot," he corrected, puffing out his chest. "This is Paco, the most exotic, intelligent, and charming bird you'll ever meet. Just like me." Paco squawked in agreement, or maybe protest, and then, in a perfect mimic of Jack's voice, blurted out, "Hey sexy, wanna ruffle my feathers?" I froze. Jack froze. Paco stared at us both, looking far too pleased with himself. "Did that bird just say something brilliant?" Jack interrupted, his grin faltering. "Yeah, he's a fast learner." "Jack, please tell me you didn't teach him that." "Well," he scratched the back of his neck, his grin turning sheepish. "He might have picked it up while I was practicing my lines for Tinder." Of course he did. Before I could respond, Paco piped up again. "Nice ass! Nice ass!" I couldn't decide whether to laugh or strangle Jack. "Why would you think bringing this thing into my house was a good idea?" Jack, ever the opportunist, shrugged. "I figured you could use some entertainment. Your husband said you've been stressed lately. And you thought a foul-mouthed bird was the solution? Paco is a classy bird," Jack protested, just as Paco squawked, "Let's get naked!" I buried my face in my hands. This wasn't happening. "Look, give him a chance," Jack said, crouching by the cage. "He grows on you. Like a fungus," I muttered. "Come on," Jack coaxed, opening the cage door. "He's perfectly." Paco shot out of the cage like a bat out of hell, wings flapping wildly. Jack yelped, ducking as the bird swooped over his head. "Controlled," I finished, glaring at him. The parrot landed on a lampshade, its claws digging into the fabric as it surveyed the room. Then, as if deciding we weren't chaotic enough, Paco started a new chant. "Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy?" Jack scrambled to his feet, his arms flailing. Okay, minor hiccup. Let me just." He lunged for the bird, missing spectacularly and crashing into the coffee table. The sound of breaking glass filled the room. "Jack!" I snapped. "Be careful. I've got this," he insisted, though his tangled limbs and the trail of destruction said otherwise. Paco, clearly enjoying the show, flapped to the ceiling fan and perched there, bobbing as the fan spun lazily. "Hey, sexy mama!" Paco called, tilting his head at me. "Don't you dare blame this on me," I said, pointing a finger at Jack. "Me? Blame you?" he scoffed, clutching his chest in mock offense. "I'm the victim here. You brought the bird. And you let me in." Before I could retort, Paco decided to up the ante. With a gleeful squawk, he launched himself from the fan and dive-bombed Jack. Jack shrieked, a sound so high-pitched it could have shattered glass, and stumbled backward, landing flat on his back. Paco landed triumphantly on Jack's chest, puffing out his feathers like a tiny conqueror. "Traitor!" Jack wheezed, glaring at the bird. I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sheer absurdity of the situation was too much. Jack, sprawled on the floor, pinned by a parrot with a vocabulary straight out of an R-rated comedy? It was ridiculous. "Glad you're enjoying this," Jack muttered, trying to sit up. Oh, I'm loving it, I said, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes. Jack managed to get to his feet, Paco still clinging to his shirt. He looked at me, his face a mix of determination and desperation. All right, he said, squaring his shoulders. Let's try this again. Paco, be a good bird and take your pants off, Paco squawked. I doubled over laughing as Jack groaned. This was going to be a long day. Jack was still fussing with Paco when the parrot decided he'd had enough of his human captor. With a sudden screech, the bird took off again, this time heading straight for the ceiling fan. As the wings flapped furiously, the fan blades spun faster, and Paco perched triumphantly on the edge, bobbing up and down like a drunken circus performer. Turn off the fan! Jack yelled, pointing at the switch. I reached for it, but before I could flip it, Paco launched himself into another dramatic flight. The momentum sent him crashing into the curtains, where he flailed like a small, feathered ghost. Jack dove to catch him, and in the process, pulled the entire curtain rod down with a loud crash. Great, I said, watching the tangled mess of fabric and feathers on the floor. Now I need new curtains. Jack wrestled with the bird, which was squawking a string of obscenities that sounded suspiciously like insults. Stay still, you little menace! You're the menace, I muttered, pulling Jack off the ground before he could break something else. Just then, Paco, clearly enjoying his reign of terror, slipped free and landed on the bookshelf. From his new throne, he tilted his head and announced loudly, Kiss me, baby! Jack turned to me with a smirk. Well, you heard the bird. Don't even start, I warned, crossing my arms. Come on, it's not like Paco lies. He winked, earning himself a glare. Focus, Jack. Get the bird. Paco took this as his cue to continue his one-bird comedy routine. He knocked over a stack of books, sending them tumbling onto Jack's foot. Son of a... Jack hopped on one leg, clutching his toes. Language, I said, barely containing my laughter. Oh, now you're worried about language? The bird just yelled, Show me the goods, 5 minutes ago. Paco, as if on cue, squawked, Show me the goods. Jack glared at the bird, and I couldn't help but burst into laughter. The absurdity of it all was too much. Here we were, 2 grown adults being terrorized by a feathered maniac with a dirty mouth. All right, new plan, Jack said, cracking his knuckles. We corner him. And how do you suggest we do that? Teamwork, he said with a grin, clearly overestimating my enthusiasm for his plans. Reluctantly, I grabbed a blanket and followed Jack's lead as he tried to corral Paco into a corner. The bird, however, was smarter than either of us anticipated. He darted between us, flapping wildly and screeching. Bad boys, what you gonna do? Jack lunged again, but Paco dodged, leaving Jack to crash into the coffee table for the second time that day. This time, he managed to knock over a bottle of wine, which spilled across the carpet in a spreading red stain. Jack! I yelled, grabbing a towel to blot the mess. It's fine, he said, waving me off as he scrambled to his feet. It's just wine. It's Merlot. That stuff stains. Oh, excuse me for not being a sommelier in the middle of a parrot apocalypse. I groaned, dabbing at the carpet as Paco landed on the television and began pecking at the screen. Jack froze, his eyes wide. Not the TV, he whispered. Anything but the TV. Paco, no! Jack cried, waving his arms. Paco ignored him, puffing up his feathers like a spoiled toddler and pecking harder. I couldn't help but laugh at Jack's sheer panic. You're more worried about the TV than my carpet? I asked. Priorities, he snapped, grabbing a pillow and chucking it at the bird. Paco squawked indignantly and flew off again, this time landing on the ceiling light. He looked down at us with an air of superiority, as if daring us to try again. Jack turned to me, his face serious. We need reinforcements. Reinforcements? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Call your husband. He'll know what to do. Are you kidding me? If he finds out you brought this bird here, he'll kill you. Jack hesitated, then nodded. Fair point. Plan B, we lure him down. And how do we do that? Jack rummaged through his pockets and pulled out a granola bar. Food. That's your big plan? A granola bar? Hey, birds love seeds, he said, waving the bar like it was some kind of magical talisman. Paco, surprisingly, seemed interested. He cocked his head, eyeing the bar with suspicion. Come on, buddy, Jack coaxed, holding the bar out. Paco spread his wings and swooped down, snatching the bar from Jack's hand. But instead of landing, he flew straight into the hallway, leaving us both stunned. Did he just steal it? I asked. Jack's shoulders slumped. He's smarter than I thought. The sound of my phone ringing interrupted our standoff. I grabbed it off the counter and saw my husband's name on the screen. It's him, I said, panicking. Don't answer it, Jack hissed. Why not? Because if he hears that bird in the background, we're both dead. Paco chose that moment to squawk. Let's get naughty! I glared at Jack, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the couch. Yeah, we're definitely dead. The door slammed open before I could even fully hang up the phone. My husband strode in, looking every bit like a man who just had the worst day at work and was ready for some peace and quiet. His tie was half loosened, his brow furrowed, and his eyes immediately narrowed at the sight of Jack standing awkwardly in the living room, holding an empty parrot cage. What the hell is going on here? He asked, his voice tight. I opened my mouth to explain, but Paco, perched smugly on the top of the bookshelf, beat me to it. Oh yeah, baby, right there! The parrot squawked, loud and clear. My husband froze. His eyes darted from the bird to Jack to me, and then back to the bird. Slowly, he set down his briefcase. Would someone like to tell me why there's a bird yelling that in my house? It's not what it sounds like, I blurted, which, of course, only made it sound exactly like what he thought it was. Jack, ever the diplomat, tried to step in. Look, buddy, I can explain everything. No, you can't, I snapped, cutting him off. You explaining things is how we got into this mess in the first place. Paco flapped his wings for attention and let out another gem. Spank me, Daddy! My husband's jaw tightened, and his gaze locked on Jack. Why is that thing calling me Daddy, Jack? Jack held up his hands defensively. It's just a bird. A highly inappropriate bird, sure, but nothing happened. Nothing happened? My husband pointed to the chaos surrounding us, the overturned coffee table, the wine-stained carpet, and the curtain rod now lying pathetically on the floor. Does this look like nothing to you? Paco chimed in again, this time with an enthusiastic harder. I buried my face in my hands, wishing I could disappear. Jack, for his part, looked like he was seriously considering jumping out the nearest window. Let me explain, Jack said, holding up his hands like he was defusing a bomb. I thought it would be a nice surprise, you know? A gift to cheer her up while you were at work. A gift? My husband's voice dripped with sarcasm. You thought that was a good idea? It seemed like a good idea at the time, Jack muttered, kicking at an imaginary speck on the carpet. My husband turned to me, his expression caught between disbelief and exasperation. And you went along with this? Do I look like someone who went along with this? I shot back, gesturing to the absolute wreck of a living room. This is what happens when you keep inviting him over. Jack stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage whatever dignity he had left. Okay, look, it got a little out of hand. A little? My husband glared. Before Jack could dig himself any deeper, Paco added his 2 cents. Who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? My husband's eye twitched. That bird is going in a cage now. Already tried that, Jack admitted sheepishly. He's wily. Wily? My husband turned to me, his voice low and dangerous. You're telling me this man brought a wily, filthy-mouthed parrot into our home and let it run loose? Pretty much, I said, too exhausted to sugarcoat it. Jack, sensing that he was seconds away from getting thrown out, made one last desperate attempt to fix things. Look, we can handle this. I'll catch Paco, clean everything up, And you two can laugh about this later. As if on cue, Paco swooped down from his perch, landing squarely on my husband's head. My husband froze. Jack froze. I froze. Paco tilted his head and whispered, "Let's get freaky." For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then my husband let out a slow, deep breath. "Get this bird off me," he said through gritted teeth. Jack lunged, but Paco saw him coming and leapt off my husband's head, landing on the couch. My husband turned to Jack, his patience visibly eroding. "You have 5 seconds to catch that bird, or I'm putting you in the cage." Jack scrambled to obey, diving over the couch like some kind of uncoordinated action hero. Paco, however, was far too quick. He flapped to the coffee table, then to the armchair, then back to the ceiling fan, all while squawking a medley of obscene phrases. My husband pinched the bridge of his nose. "Why is it always you, Jack?" "It's not always me," Jack protested, though the evidence overwhelmingly said otherwise. I sighed, stepping between them. "Okay, let's all take a breath. The bird isn't the problem here. Jack's decision-making is the problem." "Hey!" Jack protested. "You brought the bird!" I shot back. "And you let him in," my husband added, giving me a pointed look. Before I could respond, Paco shrieked. Bad boys, whatcha gonna do?" Jack groaned. "I think he's mocking us now." "No, really?" my husband deadpanned. At that moment, Paco made his boldest move yet, flying into the kitchen and knocking over an entire stack of plates. The crash was deafening, and when we ran in, Paco was perched smugly on the refrigerator, surveying his destruction. Jack looked at the shattered plates, then at my husband, and said, "I can replace those." "Get the bird," my husband growled. Jack grabbed a broom and waved it at Paco like a medieval knight. "All right, Paco, time to come down," Paco squawked. "Make me." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Even my husband looked like he was struggling to maintain his anger. Jack, however, wasn't deterred. He climbed onto a chair, reaching for the bird. But Paco had other plans. With a triumphant cry, he dive-bombed Jack, sending him tumbling to the floor. My husband shook his head. "This is why we can't have nice things." Jack groaned from the floor, looking utterly defeated. Paco, now perched on the microwave, fluffed his feathers and announced, "Best day ever!" For once, I couldn't argue. Jack sat on the floor, staring at the chaos around him as if the full weight of his poor decision-making had finally sunk in. Paco, now the undisputed ruler of the household, perched on the fridge with a smug look only a parrot could muster. "All right," Jack said, holding up his hands in surrender. "I admit it. This might not have been my best idea." "Might?" My husband crossed his arms, his expression flat. "Okay, it definitely wasn't my best idea," Jack conceded, pulling himself up with the grace of a drunk giraffe. "But let's not dwell on the past. Let's focus on solutions. Like getting that bird out of my house before I throw you both out," my husband said, his voice dangerously calm. Jack winced. "Right. Step 1: Operation Bird Retrieval. Step 1 was supposed to happen 3 disasters ago," I muttered, leaning against the counter. Ignoring me, Jack grabbed a towel, wrapped it around his arm like a makeshift falconer's glove, and approached Paco slowly. "All right, buddy, let's end this on a high note. Come to Uncle Jack." Paco tilted his head, considering Jack's offer. Then, with deliberate malice, he squawked, "Get lost, loser!" Jack froze, blinking up at the bird. "Did he just—" "Yes," my husband interrupted. "He did. And honestly, I don't blame him." Before Jack could try again, Paco launched himself off the fridge, landing on the counter. In the process, he knocked over a jar of flour, which exploded in a cloud of white powder. The 3 of us stood there, covered in flour, as Paco cackled like a supervillain. "I'm going to kill him," my husband said, his voice eerily calm. "The bird or me?" Jack asked hesitantly. "Both," he replied without missing a beat. Desperate to salvage the situation, Jack grabbed a handful of crackers from the pantry and held them out like an offering. "Come on, Paco. Let's be friends." Paco eyed the crackers, then Jack, and then made a sound that could only be described as laughter. With a swift flap of his wings, he sent the crackers flying, scattering crumbs everywhere. "Oh, come on!" Jack yelled, throwing his arms up. Paco fluffed his feathers, clearly enjoying himself. "Nice try, dummy!" I couldn't help it, I laughed. It was just too ridiculous. My husband shot me a look, but even he couldn't completely suppress a grin. "Okay, new plan," I said, stepping in before Jack made things worse. "We need to outsmart him." Jack snorted. "Outsmart a bird? He's already 2 steps ahead of us." "That's because you keep acting like a lunatic," I said. "We need to calm down and think." My husband nodded. "For once, she's right. We can't let a parrot outmaneuver us." "All right, genius," Jack said, crossing his arms. "What's your plan?" I grabbed a bowl and filled it with sunflower seeds. Then, I placed it in the center of the table, making sure it was within Paco's line of sight. The bird cocked his head, intrigued. "See?" I whispered. "He's interested." Paco hopped closer, his beady eyes fixed on the seeds. Jack, my husband, and I held our breath as the bird cautiously approached the table. "Almost there," Jack whispered, inching forward. But just as Paco reached the bowl, he froze, his eyes narrowing. With a sharp screech, he grabbed a seed and flapped back to his perch on the bookshelf, leaving us empty-handed once again. "Unbelievable," my husband muttered. "He's mocking us," Jack said, pointing at the bird. "He knows exactly what he's doing." "Of course he does," I said. "You're the one who brought him here." "Not helpful," Jack shot back. Before the argument could escalate, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway caught our attention. "Who's that?" my husband asked, frowning. Jack's face went pale. Probably the guy I borrowed Paco from." "You borrowed the bird?" I exclaimed. "Technically, yes," Jack admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "But it's fine. I'll just give him back, and we'll never speak of this again." The doorbell rang, and Jack darted to answer it, clearly eager to offload his feathery nightmare. Moments later, he returned with an older man in tow, a burly guy with a thick mustache and an air of quiet authority. "Where's my bird?" the man asked, his voice gruff. Jack gestured toward Paco, who was now perched on the curtain rod, preening himself. The man clapped his hands sharply. "Paco, come!" To everyone's shock, Paco immediately flew to the man's shoulder, settling there like a well-behaved pet. "Are you kidding me?" Jack said, throwing his hands up. "He listens to you?" "Of course he does," the man said. "He knows who's in charge." Paco squawked. "Boss man!" The man turned to us, his expression unimpressed. "What the hell did you people do to my bird?" I gestured to the chaos around us. "It's a long story." The man sighed, shaking his head. "Figures. Paco's not for amateurs." Jack looked offended. "I'm not an amateur." "You're an idiot," my husband corrected. The man chuckled, patting Paco's head. "Don't worry, he's in good hands now. But maybe stick to goldfish next time, yeah?" As he left with Paco, the three of us stood in silence, surveying the wreckage of the house. "Well," Jack said finally, "that could have gone worse." My husband turned to him, his expression deadly serious. "You're never allowed in this house again." Jack opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "No. He's right." Jack sighed, hanging his head. "Fair enough." As he slunk out the door, my husband turned to me and said, "We're never speaking of this again." "Agreed," I said, collapsing onto the couch. From somewhere outside, we could hear Paco squawking one last time. "Best day ever!"